You probably remember Pythagoras from school, the triangle guy. But what if I told you that triangles were the least interesting thing about him? Pythagoras wasn't just a mathematician, he was a mystic, a spiritual revolutionary, and he was initiated into ancient wisdom schools that most historians completely ignore. Long before he founded his famous school in southern Italy, he had already traveled to Egypt, not for tourism, but to undergo years of spiritual training. There, in hidden temples, he was taught sacred knowledge so powerful it was only passed orally, in silence, to those who had proven absolute discipline and purity. To even begin his training, Pythagoras had to spend 5 years in total silence. Imagine that, 5 years without speaking a single word. Why? Because silence wasn't just a test. It was a doorway, a way to break the patterns of the ego and hear the vibration behind all things. Most people don't know this side of him. They were never meant to. Why would silence matter so much? Because to the ancients, silence was not emptiness. It was presence, a sacred container. And Pythagoras believed that without mastering silence, one could never hear the true harmony of the universe. He wasn't learning formulas. He was training his mind to align with universal rhythm. Every sound, every number, every shape, he believed, had a frequency, a tone. And if you could tune yourself to those frequencies, you could unlock the blueprint of existence itself. He called it the music of the spheres, a concept where planets, stars, and atoms all hum at their own pitch, and when in harmony, they create order, balance, and awakening. This was more than philosophy, it was practice. The Pythagorean path required strict discipline, silence, plant-based diet, daily contemplation, and intense inner purification. The goal? To transform your body into an instrument that resonates with cosmic truth. This isn't what they teach in math class, but it's the real reason his school was feared and eventually suppressed. To Pythagoras, numbers weren't just tools for counting, they were alive, living symbols. He taught that each number held a distinct vibration and spiritual principle. 1 was unity, 2 was duality, 3 was harmony, 4 represented structure, and so on. These weren't abstract ideas, they were seen as cosmic laws, reflected in music, nature, and the human soul. He believed the universe itself was built on mathematical patterns, and that by studying these patterns, we could better understand our own consciousness. Geometry to him was sacred. The triangle, a representation of mind, body, and spirit. The circle, eternity and divine order. This is why Pythagoras demanded discipline from his students, because decoding reality meant purifying perception. You couldn't just study numbers, you had to become attuned to their meaning, their resonance. And most importantly, he believed that this knowledge wasn't meant for everyone, only for those ready to awaken. That's why secrecy wasn't exclusion, it was protection. If this truth sparked something inside you, don't let it fade. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and stay with us, because the knowledge they buried, we're bringing it back. Pythagoras didn't stop with numbers and shapes. He believed sound itself was a healing force, that certain tones could restore balance to the body and even elevate the soul. He taught that the human body is like a lyre, an instrument. When its strings are out of tune, we suffer, but when brought into harmony through sound, we heal, physically and spiritually. He used specific musical scales and frequencies to treat illness, calm the mind, and induce altered states of awareness. This was the birth of what we now call sound healing, a practice rooted not in superstition, but in deep vibrational science. Pythagoras believed that illness was a form of dissonance, a disruption in the soul's natural rhythm, and just like music could disturb, it could also realign. This view wasn't metaphorical. To him, every aspect of the cosmos was musical, vibrational, structured by divine frequency. Healing was just remembering the original song your soul was meant to sing. Most people assume Pythagoras just taught abstract math, but to his inner circle, numbers were sacred doors to the soul. He taught reincarnation, not as belief, but as knowledge. He claimed to remember his own past lives. In fact, he once pointed to a soldier's shield in a temple and said, "That was mine, when I was another." This wasn't mysticism for show. His teachings on soul transmigration came from Egyptian mystery schools, where the soul was seen as eternal, evolving through lifetimes like music through movements. To Pythagoras, your soul was on a journey, and each lifetime was a lesson, a vibration you had to master. He believed that every action, every thought, had a resonance that shaped your soul's next phase. And by aligning your life to harmony, discipline, and awareness, you could ascend, not just spiritually, but energetically. Soul refinement to him was the true goal of existence. No wonder his school was so selective. They weren't training students, they were preparing souls. But not everyone welcomed this wisdom. The deeper Pythagoras' teachings went, the more threatening they became to the established order. Why? Because his philosophy offered power through inner awakening, not external control. You didn't need temples, priests, or blind obedience. You needed discipline, introspection, and alignment with natural law. This was dangerous. It shifted authority from outside institutions to the individual soul. That's why his school was burned, why his followers were hunted. Not because they were wrong, but because they were free. The truth he taught wasn't easy. It required you to face yourself, strip away illusion, and rewire your life to match the harmony of the cosmos. But for those who did, it was liberation, not just from suffering, but from the cycles of unconscious existence. And that's the part most history books leave out, not what he taught, but why they tried to erase it. Pythagoras didn't see his teachings as belief, he saw them as remembrance. To him, truth wasn't something new to learn, it was something ancient to remember, something your soul already knew before it forgot. His entire method was a return to harmony, to divine order, to the music that shapes creation. Every symbol, every number, every ritual was designed to awaken memory, not just of past lives, but of your place in the cosmos. That's why his teachings weren't meant to be broadcast. They were meant to be lived. In silence, in study, in the sacred repetition of practice. He believed that when you align your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions with universal law, a shift occurs. You stop being a separate piece and start vibrating with the whole. That's where real power begins, not in domination but in resonance, not in belief but in becoming. So why were Pythagoras' teachings buried? Because they didn't serve the systems built on obedience. They awakened people. They reminded you that the universe isn't outside of you, it's encoded within. He taught that every person carries a divine spark, that we are not random, but rhythmic, not mechanical, but meaningful, that behind every sound, number, and shape is an invitation, a calling to remember who you are. He believed enlightenment wasn't a gift, it was a discipline. A vibration you cultivate daily through thought, action, and devotion to harmony. And that's what made it threatening. Because a society built on fear collapses when people realize they are instruments of divine order. That's why his teachings were hidden, not to protect the unready, but to silence the ready. But now, you've heard them. And the question is no longer, what did Pythagoras know? The question is, what will you do with it? What if the only reason you never understood the universe is because you were taught to look outside when the entire map was always inside you?